Yeah, Mero, yeah, just as they said earlier. So I, I've always believed that we cannot escape this thing called agriculture because we eat food every day. Yeah, those moments when people have chosen not to eat food, they've died. We all remember what happened in Shakahola, starved to death. So, on a lighter note, so the importance of this field is crucial. Yeah, just as medicine is important, health is important, mental health, education, agriculture is also equally important. Yeah, though the significance varies because of subjectivity. Some people might think it's not important and vice versa, but because we still eat food every day, this is a very important field. So of course, there's always that concern
food every day
that
if I'm not
this is a very
practicing
important field.
something,
So
why should I know about it?
of course,
Yeah,
there's always that
majority of youth today they
concern
want to get in
against
this
that
venture. If I'm
and
not practicing,
they happen to just be consumers. So you find that it's seen as something for the peasants, as in something low end. So you find that those who really practice this are mostly in rural areas and they are not in urban centers. But of course, trends have been changing. The cost of living is extremely high. Um, as Ezekiel put it, getting employment is hard. So engaging in this kind of venture is a reliable alternative towards building self-sustenance and reliance because you realize as young people in years to come from now, we won't be depending on our parents for money. Parents would just be just wanting to check on you, or even in some way or another, depending on you directly in a way. And perhaps I believe most of us would be having families 5 years down the line. So we need to think of a way of being self-reliant. So basically, at this point of time, we all know what agribusiness entails from the simplest sense, just agriculture and business. So where you have growing of crops and rearing of animals, it's a commercial activity that's meant to generate profit and make money. As simple as that. However, they are always complex. Can I put it? Circumstances that entail this whole concept. Just as medicine, people might think medicine is all about treating a person and giving them medicine when they do fall ill, or perhaps maybe counseling. They think maybe it's all about just giving therapy, but there's always something more complex. Even education, being a teacher, the process of teaching a child is always chronological and complex. So if you've not really gone to school to study how it goes, you may not be a good teacher because maybe you don't know how to control emotions, so you'll cane the kids, demoralize them. Yeah, for our case now, we study a number of things, but because this is a very big and wide topic, I really narrowed it down to youth, specifically young people, and where I really thought many of us can be able to borrow a leaf or two. As I said from the beginning, you might find that if you sample 10 young people, one or two are the ones who directly involved in this venture. The other eight may be involved in it at a secondary and tertiary stage. And talking of stages, in agriculture, we have stage one, two, and three. So stage one is primary production, where farmers are the ones who engage on the farm, and they're the ones who grow the crops or rear the animals. We don't know about that actually. Majority of people don't even know the dynamics that ensue in that process. They don't even know uh, how maybe a certain crop is grown, what is required, how long it takes, what kind of fertilizer is required, insecticide, pesticides, and all those sort of stuff. That's primary or stage one. We also call it direct agriculture. Then stage two is tertiary. Sorry, stage two is secondary. That's post harvest. When produce leaves the farm, it goes to a collection center, to a processing center, at a factory. Then it undergoes value addition. And stage three is market outreach and consumption. So all of us are stage three consumers because we do consume food. So we're tertiary consumers or tertiary players in the agriculture value chain. By value chain, we mean that complex network of activities that sees the way food focuses on the way food moves from basically the farm all the way to our plates. Yeah, so when you go buy something from the market, it's undergoing a number of stages and processes. So it's important to have bits and knowledge of how some of the things function, so that at least you can be able to navigate through some of these hard times, because things are not the same as they used to be. Cost of living is kind of high as it used to be, and also generally the standard of our food is worsening. So it's imperative to realize that people need to grow their own food. Yeah, I didn't want to go much into the quality of food and how it's worsened over time. But one thing I would say is industrialized food or processed food comes, of course, at a cost. That is why today, if we do have a medic with us here, they will definitely concur and agree and say the onset of people consuming a lot of industrial food has led to uh, an increase of surges in lifestyle diseases, the likes of cancer, diabetes. Yeah, but now since I'm not a medic, I'm not going to go into some of those details. I'll go straight to the point of what brought us here. So normally, ideally, we are being advised to focus on a number of models. Models are theoretical representations that make a complex phenomenon much more easier to understand. And for everyone who studied business at high school, you must have come across demand and supply. Yeah, even for those who are maybe at the university, demand and supply. That's like the most basic of models, of economic models that we use. But now for this case, in agribusiness or agriculture in specific, we use what we call the PDEC model. So the PDEC is production, distribution, exchange, and consumption. So as I mentioned, production is farm level activities. Of course, it's obvious that majority of those who stay in urban centers don't engage in farm activities. Then distribution is transfer and transfer and movement of goods and products from point A to point B, which is farm to market center, or distribution point, or collection point, or wholesale point. Then E is exchange. Exchange is that process that ensues when you go to buy food, because exchange means there's transfer of value. So you are buying the food at a cost, and that you'll pay for it. So it's an expense on your end as a consumer. Then to the seller, it's a cost. Yeah. Now, the exchange process or stage is that point whereby there's that close interaction between buyers and sellers. Then we have consumption. Consumption is now uptake, you know, uptake of the food that has been bought. So for us young people, of course, those who are attending, and I would like to be very simple as possible and also not dwell a lot in complexities. If you can have a clue about each of these stages, then you can be able to identify how to be cost effective and reduce wastages, and also narrow down expenditure. For example, for those who do reside in rural areas, you definitely have large chunks of land. So it's always important to put them to best use. But before I continue, I'd like to talk about some of the factors that determine interest in agribusiness amongst the youth. First of all, upbringing and family background or history is very important, because you don't expect somebody who's grown up entirely in an urban setting, town or city, to overnight wake up and say, I've got an interest in this kind of activity. It doesn't happen that way. Of course, it's always a long-term gradual sort of thing. So you expect those who've grown up actually in rural areas to have a better clue, and those actually who stay in rural areas are the ones who engage in some of the activities. But now you realize there's been massive, we call it rural urban migration, where people are now shunning to stay in rural areas. I wouldn't want to say the word village, because we're not even allowed to say village. Yeah, it's not allowed. Like, it's against some of the standard laws. Yeah. So those residing in rural areas tend to have greater interest and hence are more predisposed to some of the practices that ensue in the field. So these are the people who have a better understanding of things that happen at the primary level or in production. So you find that someone who's grown up and they've gotten cows, he or she knows what to do about them, goats, how to feed them, then those who maybe grow crops the same. So broadly speaking, we've gotten a classification of the ventures in agriculture into basically two. It's either growing of crops or rearing of animals, one of the two. But now the two are equally broad because crops can either be grown for food, for fiber, or for fuel, any of the two, or even for chemical purposes. But now, for this particular case, is growing crops for food. We are domesticating and taming certain plants. Then, of course, there are already improved varieties. So we're going to use them to get what we'll be eating. That's the most effective of being cost effective and also lowering down the cost of living because you realize why buy food when you can grow it for yourself. Yeah, it's quite expensive to buy constantly. So it's better you grow it yourself. That's aspect one. Aspect two is rearing of animals. Though over time we've gotten specific classification of the animals that are reared, and now we've had a curvature. We've carved out poultry separate from livestock. So the rearing of birds for both meat and eggs purposes has been carved out from livestock, so it's not regarded as livestock. Same thing applies to fisheries. So though for most people, they definitely understand how uh, animal rearing happens, which is livestock. Of course, we rear them for basically two purposes, which is obtaining or deriving meat or milk, one of the two. Yeah, though we still have hides and skins and other secondary products that come out. So as a young person, you identify your bringing and how does it go in line with your area of interest. Then, of course, passion is very important, of which passion actually is what creates time. You realize people are extremely busy, engaged with a number of activities that are not even anywhere related to this particular aspect. So, if you really have the passion for something, you definitely have to create time for it. Then, of course, the environment, quite important. For someone living in a typical urban center like Nairobi or Meru, it's quite impossible to engage in agribusiness at the production stage unless you do secondary marketing, which is now at distribution and exchange stages. Because for someone, maybe you can be a middleman, you can go buy produce cheaply, then ship and transport it by yourself to the market center, then sell. We'll get to that in a short while. So we've now realized that the interest is determined by upbringing, passion, then the environment and time. So because I personally believe we need to always understand something before engaging in it. And as young people, if something is a trend, we don't fall for it. If they do say, "Oh, agriculture is a backbone of the economy," well and good. But now, how is it directly benefiting you, and how are you equally benefiting from the venture, and how are you making a good use of the venture itself? How is agriculture helping you maybe deal with some of your challenges and problems? Yeah, I wouldn't want to discourage, but I would say definitely understand your niche. By niche, I mean how important the venture is to you, and how are you going to benefit from it, of course, because that's one of the quickest ways through which can be able to identify where we are very capable of benefiting from the venture. So which equally entails the type of venture you'll be engaging in, because we do have specific factors for each of the respective activities, because you cannot definitely grow certain crops in places that are hot or vice versa. You cannot definitely rear some types of animals under certain conditions. That's important too. But now, since it's a little bit way technical, uh, I'm just going to brush through some of the basic factors that we always take into account. Yeah, I know that you identify where you are and how it suits best your needs. So I've talked about the ventures and the types of activities, and depending on where you are physically, by location I mean the market needs. Where you are, people in need perhaps of chicken or meat or beef, whatever. You always take time to study the market and identify. Yeah, and I would like to say there are quite a number of similarities between business and agribusiness. Though agribusiness is a high risk affair. High risk means the moment you put in your small investment, there are chances that it might fail. This one we say without fear of favor, because of a number of factors and challenges that definitely arise from the productive activity itself. For example, rearing of animals, they are kept. There's a possibility of them falling sick and all dying. There's a way, especially for those who are in poultry, they'll tell you I've lost almost all my birds. For crops, crop failure is a very big threat because of unpredictable weather circumstances and also poor planning, using a bad variety of seeds, poor inputs, poor quality inputs. Like they've been having fake fertilizers in the market for those in Kenya. So I definitely encourage each of us to understand the niche and how the venture intends to improve our lives. Yeah, because just because someone is actually engaging in agriculture does not necessarily mean you equally have the same chances in regards to engaging in the same venture. So I wanted to also place emphasis on the challenges and constraints that many young people tend to face when engaging in agribusiness, because many people don't take time to really understand how a certain market structure tends to function. Yeah, I didn't want to use much of these technical terms, but market structure, I mean the interaction between buyers and sellers. Yeah, when you're in a certain place, of course, people constantly buy food, and as I jokingly said earlier, every time now we want to avoid eating food, we're going to die. Just as wow, Shakahala. Yeah, other lighter or just a joke. Yeah, so some of the constraints, uh let me say this. We can equally borrow from management, because now agribusiness is business itself. So management, for those who understand how administration and management functions, we broadly classify challenges and problems into two types. We have macro and micro. Yeah, basically internal and external. Then we equally also make reference to what we can control and what we cannot control. So if you reinterpret the same concept in your personal life, I think for micro, we make reference to what we can control. You can control your personal finances, you can control your time, you can control your interaction and communication with others, you can control your passion and hobbies, you can control quite a number of things at a personal level. That's micro and it's internal. Then on the other end, we equally have macro, external, things we cannot control but affect us directly. Inflation, political stability, weather, perception, how people view us. We definitely cannot control some of these things. So still in agriculture, we equally have that same concept whereby there are certain aspects of the ventures. By venture, I mean activity that you as a farmer, because right now when you say I'm interested in venturing into poultry or into livestock or into growing any other vegetable crop, like maybe parsley, which is they call it dania. Is it? I'm not sure if I've said it right. Yeah, dania, parsley. So we're going to definitely call you a farmer, and you're going to be classified as a farmer. So you deserve the kind of information. So you'll be guided in that regard. Yeah. So in regards to micro, things that the farmer himself can control, and you realize you can control the scale of production and output, how much you can grow, or how many animals you can rear, or how many liters of milk you intend to get from that cow, or how many trays of eggs you intend to derive from those poultry. Then for macro, but still in regards to micro, sorry, things you can control, you equally have to control the finances and also do the planning, do the strategy, and also identify the markets. But now for macro, you realize it's a little bit more complex because number one, you're not the only person in that field. There are quite a number spread across the country, or even in that very vicinity of yours. So you all of you are equally affected by large scale challenges and circumstances that have nothing to do with you. Inflation, high cost of living, high interest rates, lack of finance, market collapse, price fluctuations. Mention them all. But of course, there's also another method that we use called the SPEH. SPEH is we have social, political, economic, and humanitarian, of which humanitarian, anyway, depending on the field, we can replace it with legal. But now, even in regards to this SPH concept of analyzing the micro environment, because the challenges are in the environment. For those who understand business, it's definitely obvious. Yeah, it's something easy to understand. Yeah, you realize for most of those who understand with business, there are certain social challenges, those that involve people, because now this is a sociological factor. You're not growing this food, or you're not going to rear these animals or produce this produce for something other than people to consume. Take note of that. So there's a way people tend to behave and conduct themselves might or might not be suitable and favorable in line with your needs and preferences. You take that into account. Political, we live in uncertain times where anything is capable of happening. And on a very sad note, we can be having small episodes of things like mandamano. And just imagine your venture is in one of the counties where there's mandamano. Then your merchandise is either stolen or looted. It's gotten nothing to do, but it's affected you. Take that into account. Still, security relates to the political situation. Then economic is matters to do with money and finance. You realize we operate in a world where there's a lot of connectivity in terms of finances, and macroeconomic factors like inflation affect us directly. We all do remember last year, for those who are keen enough, we had issues with the currency here in Kenya, and it was apparently losing a lot of value. And many people don't really seem to get it until they get to feel the pinch of the cost of living. And how do we manage the cost of living? We scale down and be cost effective. How do we be cost effective? You engage in agribusiness. So for those who actually in rural areas, they don't really get to feel it much because they have the opportunity to grow their own food. They don't buy the food from elsewhere. So it's a little bit easy to handle. But now for those in urban centers, if you really do know somebody in the rural areas, we definitely need to support them by purchasing from our own rural areas. But of course, cost effectiveness comes into play. But however, if it's available, we don't need to allow middlemen exploit our farmers. That's just some simple piece of advice. So if you're here and in your rural area, you know quite a number of farmers, you definitely have to revisit some of your expenditure on food by at least trying to get food back from home. So the economic factor actually, most people tend to think it's all about money or the financial bit of it, but now also the cost of living is inclusive, and also things like inflation are equally inclusive because they affect the price of any other commodity. Because even there's a way transport, sort of fuel prices tend to affect transport prices, which again affects food prices. So it's counter effective, counter interactive in a way. One thing leads to another. Then for the legal, take into account that this is a business, and of course, just like any other venture, maybe like in transport or in any other sector, like a small kiosk, general merchandise, you still have regulations to follow. And though there's no total oversight and regulation, I mean control by an external third party, which is definitely the government, both at county and national level. uh, you realize for certain crops you have to meet certain requirements and standards. Tea is not just grown that way. You must be part of a cooperative union. Same thing applies to coffee, because if you still grow your crops, someone must buy it, and these are shaded commodities that people don't just buy on the streets. as well as an open market system where the product is sold. So you take that into account. And there are logistical challenges that arise always because you might see people engaging in tea, but you don't equally have the capital, land, and the associated resources, including labor, to venture into tea. So you look at the legal aspects of the venture you wish to go into. Yeah, for maize, maize is still quite informal, though the government has a direct influence on maize prices, especially with other mills. But now also, it's a little bit easier to join into. Same thing applies to poultry, dairy. Yeah, provided you've identified a supply need, because the person is going to buy your produce. Yeah, we talked about cost effectiveness. You don't produce when no one is going to consume. That's a standard rule. You'll be making losses. And since this is a business, we said it's a profit making entity and venture. So still in regards to the legal, let me be concluding. I'll go here after the remedies. Yeah, still in regards to the legal aspect of agriculture and agribusiness, are you growing something that's acceptable by law? For those who have equally been keen, you get to realize there's an ongoing scuffle or an issue between the farmers of Mira or Cat. It's called Cat, with some of the buyers at the cost. So there's a little bit of an issue here and there. So just imagine if tomorrow you venture into an activity, then they say this crop is illegal. Maybe 100 years from now, uh, new research emerges and says tea is not healthy. So what happens? Those who be growing tea, of course, they must seek for any other alternative. We still have aspects like the growth of marijuana. It's illegal, or the poppy leaves. It's equally illegal because the cannabis plant, cannabis sativa, is illegal in Kenya and I think most of the countries. So you're breaking the law. In regards to animals, it's not illegal officially, but it's against social cultural norms to rear pigs, because maybe you're having Muslims around you and they don't feel comfortable about it. That's against their faith. There are quite a number. So you consider what it takes to engage in this venture, and is it in line with what's required? Are you meeting the compliance standards? Are you complying to what has been set? So I didn't intend to go past 40 minutes actually. I mean, because this is not a lecture. As in, you're not going to sit for an exam and be told describe the micro environment in agriculture. No. But the aim is to at least enlighten the audience on a number of things, and also for them to have the basic knowledge. Yeah, I wish I really had more time. We could go through and demand and supply, but that's not possible for now. Yeah, it needs very complexity because many of us don't really understand some of these things, because you find people continuously consume something not knowing that it has alternatives, and it's not cost effective. It's becoming more expensive. People can no longer afford. Yeah. So in regards to dealing with some of the remedies and solutions to the challenges that exist, it's always important to begin by we revisit the mode of ours, the production, distribution, and exchange and consumption model. Then we see at what stage are we facilitating our venture. If you're keen enough, I've placed a lot of emphasis on the production and distribution aspects. But even consumption is very important, because you can still open your hotel and it's an agri-business actually. Yeah, that's quite important. But now at that stage, most of the constraints are related to the economy and finance, because startup capital, not many people really have it. So for those who the most basic of counsel that we can always share with young people in regards to those who have interest in joining agribusiness, the counsel remains join a cooperative union or a SACCO, any of the two, then buy shares. For SACCOs like year two, you can buy shares as low as 5,000, then continuously and progressively save to have adequate bargaining power to take a loan, 3 times what you've been able to save then invest that money in the venture of your choice based on how I've been able to describe, because the decision is always made by the farmer. I think this we share that concept with, I think, counselors, whereby counselors do say the client is always right. I don't remember, is it that you guide the client or something of that sort? So we equally realign together with them in that regard. So at a personal level, I encourage each of us to think about how we can divest from retaining a lot of liquid cash at a personal level to being able to invest some of it elsewhere. You won't have to directly open a farm or engage in something that's production directly, but you can equally engage at each of these other stages and phases, which is distribution, exchange, and consumption. Because as I said, even opening a hotel is still agribusiness, because people do come and eat food still. So you consider and identify where you fit in best, because some of this knowledge needs to be demystified. It's never taught in class to everyone. It's taught that even if I'm not mistaken, matters mental health are not taught to everyone outside those who are in counseling or psychiatry or medicine. So the rest of us, we live in a world whereby it's trial and error. Something applies to this venture called agriculture. Yeah, though majority of us actually who do study don't practice it directly. But what I'm doing right now is akin to consultancy, because I share with the client or the farmer what I think is best, then equally shares with me what he thinks, what he's actually doing. Then we harmonize and be able to seek for a way forward, because there's a lot that they don't know, and equally there's a lot that we don't know, because as I said earlier, we don't dwell much at the primary level. We don't deal with production. Perhaps distribution is okay, exchange, yeah, then consumption. Yeah. So as I definitely conclude, encourage each of us to reach out more to some of these non-banking financial institutions. I personally believe for those who want intend to venture into agriculture, uh, banks are not for you. Banks are deal with lower risk sort of customers. And if you ever need a loan and you see a bank advertising that's giving loans, that even in a TV advert, I'm not decampaigning in a bank. No one should misquote me and say he said don't go to banks for loans. But there are always terms and conditions that must be met, and they are very stringent. That's why it's better to join a cooperative union or a circle, whereby interest rates are lower, repayment periods are equally more favorable, and the collateral terms are a little bit manageable and easy to handle. So I think being able to clock 40 minutes of talking full time, I guess can stop here. But most times I believe we don't have to retain everything. You cannot remember everything. You just pick a thing or two, what's relevant to you, then make use of it. But also my emphasis is on divestment. We don't have to focus much more on one thing. We diversify to a broad number of aspects, and this aspect and field of agribusiness is an open field for everyone. So no one is going to restrict you. Perhaps maybe a number of conditions will, but it's an open field, so and quite engaging. So you must create time and passion. So I'm seeing the moderator wants to receive a number of questions, but still, if there's any other question, then still okay. I can maybe try to answer, and that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amargira James, for that wonderful session. Personally, I've gained at least 2 or 3. And I also have a question, but mine will come later. I want to welcome any member who has any addition to make, any clarification to make, any comment, or any question. Just raise your hand or unmute and then say something. And let's just use 3 minutes to pass the questions kindly, because time has really gone. Thank you. Okay, since no one has not yet asked, okay, Ezekiel.
Okay, good evening. Mine is just like a comment or an addition that these things we are learning here online, we should put them into action. If we put them into action, we can bring change in our lives and we can bring change to the society. Like today, we have been taught about agribusiness. Think of something that you can do in agribusiness and put it into practice. So if we place all the things we are learning here into practice, then we shall become better day by day. But if we don't put them into practice, we shall be just learning and learning and learning and learning, and there is nothing, or we will not have any improvement. So let's put them into action and find a way of making these things real to come to reality. Let's make them reality so that we can have a better world and we can have a better life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ezekiel, for that comment. So my question, James, is this: you talked of the factors like in inflation or something like that. If inflation, ama inflation. I'm asking this way: do we have any control as youths? Is there anything we can do in reducing this, easing affect the agribusiness docket or something? Like, do we have any powers as youths to handle these challenges? Like, you talked of sijui ulisema inflation ama nini?
Thank you. Now, inflation is a general rise of price of commodities on the market, and you asked how do we control it, huh? And some of the challenges faced. Number one, cost effectiveness. For inflation to be put into check, we revisit lifestyle. Basically, if things really get tough and expensive, you look at the way you're living. Does it match with your income level? I remember at the beginning of this year, the time we talked about budgeting, and I still do remember vividly. I personally did emphasize the importance of cost effectiveness, and I've mentioned it like 10 or so times. So for those who are in the venture, who are already practicing, you cut down on costs. If it means scaling down production, you do so. If it means seeking for more markets, you do so. If it means upscaling production, you do so, because at the end of the day, the aim is to make profit. But now, for inflation to be put in check, we have what we call supplements and alternatives. Everyone knows that if rice gets really costly, we'll all run to ugali. If milk gets costly, we run to tea. If a cake gets costly, we all run to bread. That's quite basic. So for every level of a commodity, for every particular commodity, there's always a specific alternative. Very few commodities don't have alternatives, maybe like salt. So those ones become automatically given goods, and their price ranges are supposed to be fairly lower for everyone to afford, so they're not subject to force of demand and supply. So we control inflation basically by revisiting our lifestyles and trying to make them way more cost effective than they are. Yeah.
Thank you. I think you made it now clear to me na nimeelewa vizuri. So anyone with anything to add on or any other question? Yes, Abraham.
Good evening. Yes, I hope I can be heard. Good evening,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen.
Good
Thank you
evening.
so much. Thank you so much, Amargira James, for sharing with us those wonderful insights. Now, you said you mentioned about he said how to reduce our cost of living, or how to improvise is by growing crops at home or buying from rural areas from our people. You go, someone in the village, you go and get from them food. But don't you think it would sum up, like for instance, if someone is to bring from the food from the village, the transport costs might be able to sum up with the same costs of buying food while in the urban areas. I'm just thinking about it. It's like, is it not tiresome for someone to keep going? Imagine my village is so far from here, and I need to go and get food from the village, from the rural area. You said we should not use village, from the rural areas. Is it not costly? When the cost still sum up to this cost that we are supposed to overcome? Yeah, so that's what I was. I'm just thinking about it, and I'm like, can you advise on this? Or if you had to say we had to grow crops in urban areas, and I'm living in a like residential area, and there's nowhere. Maybe I just have a backyard where we just have a few trees, and I can't turn it into a garden. So I don't know how you can advise on that. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really good question. Apparently, there's a law in agriculture marketing that states that food produce moves from points of surplus production to points of deficit need, and that's from rural to urban centers. So there's all your emphasis was on costs, as in shipping or
Talent is
transporting
like
food
a
from a rural
perfume
area
bottle.
to
If
an
you
urban
if you
center,
never
when the costs, when summed up, be the same or higher to buying food from an urban center. Now, take into account the fact that whenever food gets value added into it, or the moment it goes into a processing plant, the prices tend to shoot up. Let me give an example of maize, corn that's been pre-sifted, harvested, dried, then pre-sifted at corn stage. I'm looking at the prices of a specific, say, 2 kg tin. It would go for mostly about 70 to 80 shillings. The same quantity of maize corn, when milled into fine sifted maize flour and processed, shoots automatically to about 170 shillings. Yeah, maybe perhaps there'll be a significant increase. The question is fairly good, depends entirely on the produce in question, because for certain delicate and perishable produce that cannot be shipped or transported in small quantities, fruits and vegetables over long distances in kilometers and more time, spending more time on the road definitely induces wastages. But now for the grains, cereals, and some of the long-lasting foods that are not directly perishable, it is definite and imminent that the cost will always be lower. Yes, I said there's an exception to this because you cannot ask for tomatoes or onions, whatever, from a village setting. Reason being, depending on how far you are from the rural area, the amount of time it takes to arrive, they will definitely be wasted, and wastages and spoilages tend to significantly reduce quality of food. Then also the amount of time on the road significantly reduces their nutrient content. Of course, that's diminished quality. However, the cost effectiveness is still fairly low because they're readily available at fairer, cheaper prices. But now this concept applies strictly mostly to grains, as I mentioned to you, maize, because you can buy 50 kgs of maize corn at a price 3-4 times lower than processed maize flour at market value when already processed and sifted into maize flour on the market. Then when the same corn, taking it to a mill for sifting and grinding, would cost about from when last I did it, it was 15 shillings for 2 kgs. So when you do the maths, you get to realize it's more cost effective. So we ought to fully understand the perishability of the commodity we're trying to purchase, and in what quantities, because economies of scale plays a really important bit in this regard. as I gave an example of tomatoes, we cannot ask for a crate of tomatoes. Yeah, that would definitely take maybe 6 to 8 hours on the road, and chances of spoilages are equally high. They wouldn't last long in the house when stored under such low temperature conditions. So that's how I answer the question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So I hope, Abraham, you've been answered well and you are satisfied with the answer that James has given. So I've not seen anyone else with a question in the chat box. Up to this point, I'll just... Yes, Abraham?
Thank you so much. I see I see time is running a lot, but I love to ask questions because in that I get answers in my head and what I'm trying to do. So one time I attended a facilitation on investment, and an investment specialist at